Shocking betrayal. China and India turn against Russia. Find out why. Russia has become the boogeyman of the modern world, with a highly unpopular war waged on Ukraine, its neighbor a year ago. Russia is quickly losing support all over the world. The realization is gradually beginning to settle that this was a misadventure with dwindling returns. In this video, we will explore how Russia has completely become isolated from its more robust supporters, including China and India, so stay tuned. But before we begin further, I would request you to subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was problematic from the start. The international response was one of severe condemnation, and although Russia was big enough in terms of trade volume of gas-related products, it is being sidelined gradually. Now, in terms of its progress in Ukraine, Russia is pretty much on the back foot. There are reports that have explicitly stated how Russian casualties are mounting, and Ukraine is now on the counteroffensive. NATO allies have delivered on their promise of military assistance to Ukraine. But even though Russia was maligned in the international community, there were some states which stood in support of Russia. Most of these states supported Russia by not outrightly condemning the war on Ukraine. Back in 2022, when the war had started, some 141 countries had voted in a General Assembly in support of the resolution which called for ending the war and condemning Russian aggression. But in the same vote, there were 32 countries, including some very influential Asian states such as China, India, Pakistan, and Vietnam, which abstained from voting. There was a tiny minority of countries which supported Russia's actions, which included Syria, Eritrea, Belarus, and you guessed it, North Korea. Serbia and Turkey did not participate in the vote, which placed stringent sanctions against Russia. Now, in terms of numbers, this does not amount to much, but you have to remember that states choosing to abstain from voting altogether make up 2/3 of the global population. This means that 60% of the population wanted nothing to do with Russian aggression against Ukraine. Initially, this could be interpreted as a big win for Russia in global diplomacy. But as things stand today, the situation has changed quite a bit. Let's take India for instance. Not only did India abstain from voting against Russia in the General Assembly, but also did not support the sanctions levied against Russia. This made a lot of sense, and we can still recall how India sold its stance to the rest of the world. It did not get much ire from the Americans for continuing trade with Russia. India, along with China, are the main trading partners of Russia. But at the G20 summit later in 2022, Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, the head of India and China respectively, voiced concern against the war. Moreover, India abided by Western terms for trading Russian oil at $60 per barrel. And although India has continued to trade with Russia, it cannot be expected to be Russian loyalist if push comes to shove in global politics. Serbia has been closely aligned with Russia. In fact, when the war initially broke out, there were pro-Russian rallies in Serbia. Serbian leaders have blamed NATO for the war instead of blaming Russia. This close relationship has a lot of history. For reference, remember the Kosovo-Serbia affair, and that is why Serbians actively supported Russians. But the Serbian love for Russia did not last long, even after buying the Russian oil at a huge discount. The Serbian president voiced concerns against Russian invasion and said that it cannot, in good faith, support this war. This was a response against Putin's acceptance of Kosovo's independent status. The indirect recognition of Kosovo as an independent state certainly frustrated Serbia. But there was a lot more rational calculation to this as well. Serbia depends on the EU for its trade much more than it depends on Russia. This means that Serbia could not solely rely on Russia for keeping its economy afloat. Hungary is yet another country which has always been a close supporter of Russia. Although Hungary has traditionally been a close ally of Russia, it has started to become distant recently. The reason is actually pretty straightforward. Any state will side with the power bloc which provides the most lucrative economic and trade packages, and since the EU has the most lucrative economic and financial packages to offer, Hungary chose EU. Russia is already financially marginalized. It would be impossible to offer enough carrots to lure its former satellite state closer at this time of need. In fact, the slow detachment of Hungary and Serbia from Russia could be interpreted as a sure loss of diplomatic support from its closest allies. Now, finally, let's talk about Turkey, China, and Pakistan. Turkey abruptly stopped the supply of sanctioned items in the bilateral trade, which topped $9.3 billion in 2022. Presumably, Turkey responded to the increased pressure of the US and EU to cut down on trade relations with Russia. Also, China, one of the more robust trade partners, dedicated to stop supplying Russia with the latest military hardware. Refusal of sending Chinese military support or military funding to Russia. A critical ingredient of the Chinese decision to stop funding Russia in this war was balancing strategic considerations. China is known for maintaining its soft power through diplomacy and trade instead of brute power. This may actually signal Chinese prudence and its intent to build bridges with the Biden administration. Pakistan has actually sold its armaments to Ukraine and tried to mend bridges with the West, which were damaged under Imran Khan's government. So there you have it. Under the weight of political considerations and more lucrative opportunities, staunch supporters of Russia are abandoning it gradually. How do you wargame this scenario? Feel free to comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. See you in the next one.